Hello and welcome to WION Live, broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett. America's 20-year-old military presence in Afghanistan has ended. The last US troops have left Kabul and the Taliban is in complete control. In this bulletin, we'll bring you all the latest updates from Afghanistan. Let's start with the headlines.
I'm here to announce the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the military mission to evacuate American citizens, third country nationals, and vulnerable Afghans.
20 years of US military presence in Afghanistan comes to an end. The US announces the complete withdrawal of its troops as the last American evacuation flight leaves Kabul.
That they would be repairing all of these.
WION reports from the ground in Kabul as members of the Taliban take control of Kabul International Airport. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid congratulates Afghans, calls the American exit a defeat and a lesson for other invaders. Celebratory gunfire rings out in Kabul.
As of today, we've suspended our diplomatic presence in Kabul and transferred our operations to Doha, Qatar.
The US suspends its diplomatic presence in Kabul, transferring its operations to Qatar amid an uncertain security environment and political situation in Afghanistan. And in a major social intervention, China restricts children under 18 from playing video games for more than 3 hours a week in a bid to stop addiction to what it's described as spiritual opium. America has ended its longest war. The United States has completed its military withdrawal from Afghanistan. The last of America's soldiers there boarded a C-17 aircraft. Critics of the exit say it's been humiliating for the US. Washington and NATO allies carried out massive but at times chaotic airlift operations over the past 2 weeks. Later, US President Joe Biden will address the nation to try and justify his decision not to extend the evacuation mission beyond the August 31st deadline.
In the dead of the night in Afghanistan, a minute before midnight, local time on August 31st, the United States completed its mission and ended its 20-year war in Afghanistan. A war that will be remembered for colossal failures, unfulfilled promises, and a frantic final exit. This is Major General Chris Donahue, Commanding General of the 82nd Airborne Corps and the last American soldier to leave Afghanistan on a giant C-17.
I'm here to announce the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the military mission to evacuate American citizens, third country nationals, and vulnerable Afghans. Look, there's a lot of heartbreak associated with this departure. We did not get everybody out that we wanted to get out. But I think if we'd stayed another 10 days, Louis, we wouldn't have gotten everybody out that we wanted to get out. And there still would have been people who would have been disappointed with that. It's a tough situation.
The war started and ended with the hardline Islamist Taliban in power. Ironically, the US exit depended heavily on trusting the Taliban to provide security around the airport against the threat posed by the Islamic State terror group. The war on terror in Afghanistan was declared after the 9/11 terror attacks. Since then, Afghan civilians and security forces have long taken the brunt of the failures. With tens of thousands killed and many more wounded, costs to Washington were immense too. 2,356 US military deaths and almost an overall financial cost of $2.3 trillion. The end began under President Donald Trump. In 2016, Trump promised to end the forever wars. In February 2020, Washington committed to withdrawing by May 1st this year. Taliban agreed to enter peace negotiations with Kabul and not to attack American troops in the meantime. They instead stepped up their political campaign against the Ashraf Ghani government. When Biden came to power, the official US troop presence was down to 2,500. He set August 31st as the final date of withdrawal. But the end came faster than Washington expected. The Taliban marched into the Afghan capital with no resistance. The country's own president, Ashraf Ghani, fled, leaving his citizens to fend for themselves. Harrowing scenes unfolded across Kabul. In a desperate bid to flee, tens of thousands of Afghans rushed to the Kabul airport. Many ran behind planes on the tarmac. Some even clung on to US planes as they took off, only to fall from the sky. Since the 14th of August, United States has evacuated over 5,500 of its citizens. A small number of American citizens have chosen to stay in Afghanistan. Blinken has vowed relentless efforts to help Americans and others leave Afghanistan in the coming days.
So here's our plan for the days and weeks ahead. First, we built a new team to help lead this new mission. As of today, we've suspended our diplomatic presence in Kabul and transferred our operations to Doha, Qatar, which will soon be formally notified to Congress. Given the uncertain security environment and political situation in Afghanistan, it was the prudent step to take. Second, we will continue our relentless efforts to help Americans, foreign nationals, and Afghans leave Afghanistan if they choose.
United States has also cleared its stance on engagement with the Taliban.
Every step we take will be based not on what a Taliban-led government says, but what it does to live up to its commitments. The Taliban seeks international legitimacy and support. Our message is any legitimacy and any support will have to be earned.
Washington has suspended its diplomatic presence in Kabul and shifted its operations to Qatar. United States has called it a new chapter of America's engagement with Afghanistan. But the beginning of this new chapter is ignominious, to say the least. The United States failed to defeat the Taliban. It failed to establish a functioning democracy in Afghanistan, failed to thwart the spread of Islamist extremist groups in the region, and it even failed to leave on its own terms. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Well, one of the jobs the US military completed before leaving Afghanistan was to disable scores of aircraft and armoured vehicles, along with a high-tech rocket defence system at Kabul airport. Central Command Head General Kenneth McKenzie said 73 aircraft that were already at Kabul airport were demilitarised, which means they've been rendered useless by US troops. The US built up a force of nearly 6,000 troops to occupy and operate the airport when the evacuation operations began in earnest on August the 14th. General McKenzie also confirmed the military left behind around 70 MRAP armoured tactical vehicles, which can cost up to $1 million each. Those, along with 27 Humvee vehicles, were also disabled. The US left behind the CRAM system, a high-tech defence system that was used to protect the airport from rocket attacks. It had helped fend off a 5-rocket barrage from the Islamic State on Monday. General McKenzie said CRAM systems were kept in operation up until the very last minute, just before the last US aircraft left, with Ground Force Commander General Chris Donahue and Ambassador Ross Wilson. And now the Taliban are in full control of the Hamid Karzai International Airport. Hours after the final US forces flew out of Afghanistan, Taliban leaders walked through the airport victorious. They were flanked by guards dressed in Special Forces combat kit, inspecting destroyed US helicopters. The Taliban's top spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid also arrived at the runway of Kabul airport. He congratulated Afghans and said the victory belongs to them. Mujahid said the Taliban's victory was a lesson for other invaders. He also said that the Taliban want good diplomatic relations with the US and the world. He addressed special forces at Kabul airport and they were accompanied by members of the Taliban. Footage released by local broadcasters showed Taliban fighters lined up on the tarmac of the Kabul airport. Vehicles raced back and forth along the Hamid Karzai International Airport's sole runway on the military side of the airfield. A video had also showed members of the Taliban's elite Badri 313 special forces entering the airport as the US wrapped up evacuations.
माशाल्लाह अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह माशाल्लाह अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह हाजी मौलवी साहब दा मुजाहिदीन से पैगाम लري मुजाहिदीन ته پیغام داري چې ټکان مکوي تیاری ماري د خراب نه زیاده کړو د مسلمانانو تیاری د الله پاک اشغال ختم کړي الحمدلله الحمدلله.
Ensuring the security of Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport is a key issue, and the Taliban have repeatedly said they would not accept any foreign military presence in Afghanistan. Soon after the last US flight flew out of the airport, the Taliban fired their guns in the air, celebrating victory after a 20-year war. The departure of the US plane marked the end of a massive airlift operation. Western forces evacuated tens of thousands of Afghans. However, hundreds are left behind in the new Afghanistan ruled and controlled by the Taliban. The sound of celebratory gunfire was heard across Kabul as the US exit was completed. On the first day with the Taliban in charge of Kabul airport, WION reporter Anas Malik brings us this special report as he enters the military side of the Kabul airport, which was under US control.
That's perhaps a C-130 or a C-17 Globemaster. We're entering the military side of the Kabul airport. From the civilian side to the military side, we're being escorted as well. This gate ahead, the car that you see right in front, is the one that leads into the military side. Probably one of those moments for the Taliban that they have only been thinking of. And today is D-Day, when the Taliban are now ceased to have control over the entire country, including the airports, those areas which were earlier deemed to be no-go areas.
Signs of the now departed US troops are everywhere in this hangar, ranging from a coffee machine and pens to destroyed helicopters.
I'm standing outside a hangar that says, "Warning, armed aircraft inside." But what is it in this remaining hangar inside? Let's just have a look. This is a big empty hangar right now. It has some operational things that have been left behind in haste. You'd see cables, you'd see a coffee maker that is there that has been left abandoned, some desks, some walkie-talkie sets, seats as well, plenty of screws and accessories, a medevac stretch bed, probably you see sleeping bags as well lying there on the floor, and additionally plenty of pens that you'd find. These are classic grip handles, non-staples, looks like this was perhaps converted into a makeshift hospital as well. But by and large, the sign outside read that it used to have an active armed aircraft inside over here, which looks like this hangar now looks like gives a pretty much abandoned field, things that might have been left in haste. You see stretchers over there as well, the staircase that can potentially lead to the aircraft's hedge as well, the fighter aircraft's hedge as well. So lots of stuff over here that has been left behind by the Americans and which are now in control of the Taliban.
Anas Malik with that exclusive reporting for WION. And the domestic airport too is starkly empty in the daylight. Once teeming with desperate Afghans trying to flee, no sign of those crowds now, and suitcases and clothes are left after the mass exodus.
Standing outside the domestic terminal of Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport, the barbed wires indicate that this is a no-entry zone. This is now entirely under the control of the Afghan Taliban. Be that be the civilian side, be that be the military side, the entire 100% control of the airport's internal security, runways, hangars, whatever that has been left behind is in control of the Taliban, and the Taliban are now in charge.
So, Afghanistan has entered a new era as the 20-year US military operation ends. The Taliban is in control of the country and has proclaimed full independence. The next question is exactly how it intends to run the country.
The United States has left Afghanistan. Every last American boot on the ground has departed the conflict-ridden country. Over 150,000 people, including at-risk Afghans, have been airlifted. The Taliban are in charge now. Armed Talibs are patrolling every part of the country. The Taliban has named its cabinet of ministers. It has also begun working on its relations with China and Russia. The focus will now shift from the mammoth evacuation operations to the Taliban's plans. What happens to Americans and at-risk Afghans left behind? Since August 14th, nearly 6,000 Americans have been evacuated. A small number of US citizens, however, have chosen to stay back. Around 200 expressed willingness to leave but couldn't be evacuated. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has vowed relentless efforts to help Americans and others leave Afghanistan in the coming days.
We made extraordinary efforts to give Americans every opportunity to depart the country, in many cases talking and sometimes walking them into the airport. Of those who self-identified as Americans in Afghanistan who are considering leaving the country, we've thus far received confirmation that about 6,000 have been evacuated or otherwise departed. This number will likely continue to grow as our outreach and arrivals continue.
Since there is no functioning airport, there are concerns about how those citizens will be able to leave. There are apprehensions about their fate. There is concern among sections over how the Taliban may choose to deal with them. Who will run the Kabul airport? For many, Kabul airport is the only way to leave Afghanistan. Troops of the United States and NATO allies had secured and operated the Hamid Karzai International Airport throughout August. For the past 6 years, Turkey, a key NATO member, has been responsible for security at the airport. Keeping the airport functioning is vital not just for Afghanistan to stay connected to the world, but also to maintain aid supplies and operations. How will US-Taliban relationship shape up? Not just the United States, but many countries have put the onus on Taliban. They say the future ties or dialogue with the group will depend on its own actions. Some, including Britain, have maintained that no nation should bilaterally recognize Taliban as the government of Afghanistan. A UN resolution has pressed the Taliban to ensure a humanitarian and economic crisis does not break out in the country. According to estimates, over 18 million people in Afghanistan require aid, and half of Afghan children under the age of 5 already suffer from acute malnutrition. Another major threat in the region are the Islamic State Khorasan forces. ISIS-K and Taliban are sworn enemies. The group was behind the deadly suicide bombing attack at the Kabul airport on August 26th that killed 180 Afghans and 13 US troops. Since then, United States has carried out at least 2 drone strikes against the group. US President Joe Biden has said he will continue to retaliate for the attack. On August 24th, in the highest-level face-to-face encounter yet, CIA Director William J. Burns held a secret meeting with Taliban's Abdul Ghani Baradar. But how Washington and the Taliban plan to coordinate and potentially even share information to counter ISIS-K remains to be seen. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Well, despite foreign evacuations now coming to a halt, thousands of Afghans are still seeking to flee their homeland. However, Taliban commanders have called on their countrymen not to leave. In an interview, a Taliban commander told viewers that the group's efforts are focused on Afghanistan and ensuring that its people prosper under Islamic rule. The Taliban also says it's willing to accept any Afghan migrants who had their asylum applications rejected in Europe.
ولوس د پاره به زمونږه تمرکز په دی وی چې وطن د پرمختګ لپاره یوسو ان شاء الله اسلامي نظام به اسلامي د چتر لاندې اول پیغام هیوادوالو ته دا چې هیڅ تشویش مکوئ خپل وطن کې خپل کورونو کې اوسېږئ او دا هیواد د ستاسو ته ضرورت لري او موږ او تاسو حفاظت به کوو ان شاء الله.
Now, this comes after Austria's conservative-led government takes a hard line on Afghan asylum seekers and refugees within the European Union. Austria is urging the EU to tighten external borders to avoid a refugee crisis like the one seen in Europe in 2015. Austria instead wants deportation centres set up in countries neighbouring Afghanistan. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid told an Austrian newspaper that his government would be willing to accept such deportees, but that the refugees would be taken to court, which would then decide how to proceed with them. Despite assurances from the Taliban, many Afghans still remain wary of the group's portrayal of a new, more moderate image. The United Nations has warned that Afghanistan is facing a dire humanitarian crisis as it's cut off from foreign aid amid a drought, and hundreds of thousands face displacement amid the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Moving on to China now, which has announced a drastic cutback on children's online gaming time. It's the latest move in a recent crackdown on tech giants in the world's biggest gaming market. The video gaming industry capital of the world now wants kids in the country to spend just 3 hours a week playing. Under new rules, gamers in China who are under 18 will only be allowed to play online between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays. State news agency Xinhua has described it as a bid to curb addiction to gaming. Gamers are also required to use their ID cards when registering to play online. This is designed to ensure minors don't lie about their age. On school holidays, children will be allowed to play a little longer with the allocated time set at 60 minutes per day. 23% of gamers in China are under the age of 18. However, 18 to 25-year-olds form the largest user base of around 28%. China's National Press and Publication Administration said in a statement, gaming addiction has affected studies and normal life, saying many parents have become miserable. Video game companies are prohibited from offering gaming services outside these stipulated hours, although the statement did not make it clear how rule breakers would be punished. The gaming industry has been slammed in state media reports in recent days, with one of those reports labelling games as spiritual opium. China's communist rulers have been reining in big tech and other powerful sectors that draw hundreds of millions of consumers. In the first half of this year, the gaming industry made revenue of $20 billion in China. Now, young gamers have taken to social media to express their anger at this move. Many have questioned the new rules on China's Weibo social media network. Beijing's new restrictions have had an immediate impact on Chinese gaming companies. Shares in Tencent, the world's largest gaming firm by revenue, slid 3.6% in Tuesday trading. Gaming contributes around 60% of the company's total revenue, and analysts expect to see around a 3% impact to Tencent's earnings because of the new rules. Some analysts believe children in general don't actually provide much revenue for gaming companies. However, the implications for the long-term growth of the industry could be more severe if the rules restrict the habit-forming nature of playing games at an early age. And that is all we have time for on today's WION Live broadcast from London. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. For more global news and updates, do stay tuned to WION World is One.
This is right, Arab.